Iowa State had their best year of football ever, and it was led by some of the absolute best seniors in the nation. The question is, moving forward, what will they do now with those guys gone? Today on Locked On Cyclones.
You are Locked On Cyclones, your daily podcast on the Iowa State Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or watch of the day, wherever you're getting your Locked On Cyclones content. It's completely free. And to those of you who are here every day, shout out to you guys. You guys are the ones that make the world go around. Wherever you're watching or listening, be sure to subscribe so we can prove once and for all that it is, in fact, a Cyclone state. What are we talking about today? Well, as I said yesterday, probably gonna go into some football here because I seriously can't get it off my mind. This team was so much fun to watch, and the Pop-Tart Bowl highlighted it in its greatest glory that it possibly could. So we're going to go into the guys that are going to step up next year and in the years to come with a bunch of seniors leaving. Who are those guys? And obviously who is taking their spots. And then we'll talk a little bit about Noah Pauley, wide receiver coach of the year. That's awesome. What does that mean? And what can we do with that? And then finally, Iowa State taking on Kansas in women's basketball at home today at 2 o'clock. We'll have to talk about that as well to round things out. But before we do, let's start with the football. I've got 5 standout seniors that will be leaving, and then I've got kind of a list of guys that could fill that spot. And I mostly went with the Pop-Tart Bowl game. Was where I drew those numbers from, just because I thought that was, it's the last game of the year. It was a big game, actually. I do have some of their stats for throughout the year, though, as well. That being said, let's just start with Miles Purchase, defensive back. All of these guys, you are going to know their names. These are absolute superstars for the Cyclones team. And Miles Purchase, I'm not going to get into these guys' stats, but obviously a dog. Marcus Neal is the defensive back that I picked out, not necessarily to fill his exact role. I'm not like making a comparison here of who is the most like Purchase. I just grabbed guys kind of at that same position who had good Pop-Tart Bowl games. Neal is a freshman, played 6 games this year, and then obviously the Pop-Tart Bowl adds to that, making it 7. And he had 8 tackles and 3 solos in that Pop-Tart Bowl. And I think that this Pop-Tart Bowl was kind of a good example for what we're going to see in the future, just because of, well, not like, obviously we had some guys missing, but also like injury, and it just ended up, we saw some guys that we probably wouldn't see a lot of out on the field in this game, and so they kind of got a chance to play on a big stage. So I picked Neal here. Purchase will be missed, as will Darian Porter, defensive back, and I picked another freshman. I was surprised to see 2 freshmen kind of leading that defensive stat sheet, if you will. Played 8 games this year as a defensive back, and then the Big 12 championship game and the Pop-Tart Bowl. He had 8 tackles, and 2 of them were solos. So the solo versus assist, tackle thing is dicey, because it's like how much opportunity were you given for those solo tackles? But the assist shows that he's, they're hustling to the ball. So 6 assisted tackles is still something that I look at and I say, hey, that's still something that matters for sure. Next up, obviously, this one is the one that everyone kind of was waiting for. Bo Freeler, knee injury, ends his season a little bit early, just a few quarters early. Was the absolute, kind of just the head of the monster that was the Cyclones this year, especially on defense. One of the best leaders. Matt Campbell's talked ad nauseum about this guy. And will certainly be missed, not only for his play on the field, but for his leadership throughout the locker room, week to week, how he taught the Cyclones to conduct themselves. And so I don't know if there's going to be a really good replacement for that, to be completely honest. That's something that you really just can't teach. And to be completely fair, it's just, this one is not the best one. I'm not even going to lie, outside of the leadership thing as well, because I picked a linebacker, and I don't think that a linebacker, especially that played in the Pop-Tart Bowl, is the best option. Yes, Bo Freeler was kind of a bit almost like a linebacker at times, but also we're going to be getting so many guys back from injury that I don't know if Cooper Ebel will I don't really know what's going to happen here. But he played in like every game. I think he played every game but Kansas State is what I have here. And he played pretty well. He had like 9 tackles in the first 8 weeks or something like that. At least 8 tackles, I think is what it was. And then he kind of went into a little bit of a lull and like 3 or 4 tackles for the last few weeks of the season. Didn't play Kansas State, didn't play in the Big 12 championship game. Comes back for the Pop-Tart Bowl, plays pretty well. I mean, it wasn't a head-turning performance, but definitely solid numbers and somebody that we'll probably have to look out for moving forward. But as I said, you're just really never going to be able to replace the entire persona or aura, if you will, that was Beau Freyler, everything that he brought to the team off the field as well, and was obviously a solid player, like very good player. Always ate fish in my exercise physiology class, was right in front of me. I was like, dude. But I mean, hey, that was the fuel that got us to the 11-win season. So shout out to him for that. But that being said, let's move to the offensive side of the ball. And the two guys that obviously everybody is going to be, everybody knows, Jayden Higgins, Jayden Noel, best wide receiver duo in the country. Both are going to be on their way out. Both actually just declared officially for the draft on their Instagrams or whatever. I don't know where they posted it first, but that's where I saw it. And so certainly leaving, certainly going to be a big hole to fill. Like I cannot emphasize this enough. That is a massive, massive, massive hole. Okay, and we'll get into that more in the second segment here in just a few minutes. But I picked out Isaiah Alston. Okay, he had 2 receptions for 52 yards. This was the only game he played, well, had receptions in, so I'm sure he played all year, but had receptions in. This were his first 2 receptions, and the first one was an absolute, I mean, just go up and get it, rip it out of the defender's hands. It was awesome. It was truly beautiful, and so I do have high hopes for Alston. And then I also picked out Gabe Burkle, the tight end, because, he played 7 games, Big 12 championship and the Pop-Tart Bowl. So he definitely had time this year, but he kind of came into his own in the Pop-Tart Bowl. I thought he rose to the occasion, especially in a game without a Higgins. And I was pretty impressed. He had 4 receptions for 54 yards and a touchdown, but those were pretty timely receptions, if that makes sense. Obviously, the touchdown was like a 13-yarder to kick off the game. Iowa State starting with a touchdown was huge. If we end up with a field goal there after literally getting the ball on like their 20, it's not a great look. And then maybe that whole game goes entirely differently. And I thought every time that Burkle got open, it was very timely and he was very reliable. So I like Burkle as a wide receiver option. Obviously, as a tight end, you do more than just catch passes, but big dude, definitely. I mean, I'm not gonna. I was gonna say like who he could be like, but he's Gabe Burkle. Now I'm gonna let him be him. And I think very much. I don't know if he'll be like wide receiver 2 next year. He's not gonna be like a Travis Kelce type of utilization or Brock Bowers. I think he just like broke the rookie reception numbers record or something. So I don't expect that, but I do think that he will be what I would consider like a very reliable receiver, essentially. So picked him out there, and then my third option, because 2 guys, yes, 2 in Higgins and Noel, but they made an impact of 4 guys. So I picked out 3, and I actually went with Carson Hansen. I went into the receiving stats for him on the year, and I mean, he played in every game. So 13 receptions, 88 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I mean, that's not a receiver number, right? Like that's not like a ton of receptions or yards or even touchdowns, to be completely honest. He had 1 reception for 13 yards in the Pop-Tart Bowl. That was a touchdown. So that was one of his 2. But I know I made that comparison to Cam Scadaboo yesterday. And to me, it's kind of, I'd like to see him utilized out of the backfield the same way Scadaboo was for Arizona State this year. He was a true receiver option for that team. And I don't know if they'll do that with Hansen. Absolutely, in my opinion, took over the running back 1 kind of spot in the Pop-Tart Bowl. So I don't know what that'll look like if they really just try to run him downhill as they kind of did all year this year, or if they're like, hey, maybe we can swing him out to the sides a little bit, run some screens, maybe run some. There's different ways to get the running back incorporated into the pass game. I just wonder if I think he can do it. I think Carson Hansen is good enough, and I'm very excited to see what he'll get done in the future. But the wide receivers for Iowa State have obviously stood out this year. And where will they go in the future? I'm not entirely sure, but they will be coached as of right now by Noah Pauley, wide receiver coach of the year. And we're going to have to talk about what he could do for this team moving forward and what he has done right after this. Attending the new 12-team college football playoff games is an incredible experience that brings fans together like never before. I remember the excitement of past playoff games and can't wait to make new memories with the updated format and extra teams involved. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for events even easier. It filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. Recently, I used Game Time Picks to find tickets for an upcoming game. Browsing through the deals was a breeze, and I found great value for all kinds of seats around the venue. The Super Deal, in particular, stood out as the best value for the event. I love that I could see the seat views before buying and that the app shows the total cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Plus, the on-time ticket delivery and lowest price guarantee gave me complete peace of mind. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. The Iowa State wide receivers obviously stood out this year. Jayden Higgins, Jayden Noel, they were household names. Okay, they absolutely were. But they were coached by one man in particular. This news is coming to you on Locked On Cyclones, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Noah Pauley, wide receiver coach for Iowa State. And we'll get into his history a little bit in a second, but was named the wide receiver coach of the year by footballscoop.com. Awesome. It makes complete sense to be. I don't know who else it could have been. Let's just put it that way. And so I took a look back kind of at his career. This is his second year with Iowa State. And this year there was a difference. And I also kind of wonder maybe if this is something that sticks around because we did see a bit of difference in the actual game. He took on the responsibilities of offensive pass game coordinator. Well, that seems like it's probably a pretty big deal. So obviously some things changed and he was in charge of that and they seem to go pretty well. Jayden Higgins and Jayden Noel combined for 167 receptions, 2,377 yards and 17 touchdowns. That's over 60% of the share offensively in all three of those categories. That's a pretty big deal. That is a pretty big hole Iowa State has to fill next year. And Paulie was kind of at the head of that. So I went into his career because I was like, who is this guy? What's his story? He's been doing this a while. I think it was 2011. He was a student assistant at Minnesota Duluth. Then he spent some time as a graduate assistant there and a wide receiver coach, just kind of off and on. He had a couple breaks. But then in 2019, he went to NDSU and was the wide receiver coach there. And I was like, who did he coach then? I'm just kind of curious. Who were some of these guys? Does the name Christian Watson ring a bell? I'm sure it does if you're a Green Bay Packers fan. One of the best wide receivers on that team and arguably one of the most touted talents in that class that he was drafted. And so, yeah, Trey Lance was thrown to him, but still, that's pretty good. That's a pretty big name. And now with Higgins and Noel kind of coming into their own at Iowa State in the last 2 years, Paulie might be a dude. He might be a guy. So I'm very excited about the future of the Iowa State wide receiver room because that means that we're not just getting generational talent and then using them well. We are also like with one of the best wide receiver coaches in the country. So we could definitely turn someone who's very, very good into the best, right? That's kind of what the coaching does. We progress them. We make them better. Bing, bam, boom, pow. All of a sudden, Iowa State national champions. It's coming. Don't worry. So I took a look at who do we have coming down the pipe and who could Paulie coach up next year for this great second. We'll end this year strong with the Potsdam Bowl, and then boom, next year Big 12 champions. I'm calling it my shot now. Obviously, we've talked about the transfer portal with Xavier Townsend out of UCF and Chase Sowell out of East Carolina. Those two guys, I cannot wait. I seriously cannot wait to see them in the cardinal and gold or the black and white or whatever we're going to wear. These guys are going to be really good coming in, obviously, and I can't wait to see what Paulie does with them. I think that they'll be very well-rounded, solid wide receivers. I've talked kind of about what I like, just looking at their height. I think Sal is the 6'4" dog that's going to be able to go up and get a lot of different balls, giving Rocco a big catch radius to be able to fire that ball into. And Rocco's extremely accurate, so big high hopes for Sal. And then obviously Xavier Townsend is a name that I feel like I've just been hearing about for years. So I am super excited to see him in Ames, in the Cardinal and Gold, in the Cyclones gear. So those two will be new to the program, but you got to remember Higgins came in from East Kentucky 2 years ago. So, I mean, I'm just saying that's what happened. I'm just going to leave it at that. Guys that are on the roster now, however, obviously I think there's like 5 or 6. I just took the top 3 here. Isaiah Alston, just standout Pop-Tart bowl game, and I think that is possibly an indicator of next year. I don't want to get too ahead of myself because everyone seemed to think that Abu Sama, myself included, would be the best running back in the entire nation after his show out against Kansas State last year. I wouldn't say that was the case. There were probably running backs that were a little better than Abu Sama this year. Carson Hansen probably one of them, in my opinion. And so I'm not going to get too far ahead of Alston's performance. He still only had 2 receptions, but it was for, 52 yards. So nothing to scoff at there. And then Eli Green, another name that stands out, didn't have quite the stats of the next guy, but definitely someone we'll have to try to turn into a top-tier wide receiver. And then Carson Brown, 9 receptions, 129 yards and a touchdown this year, had the most, the best stats really outside Higgins and Noel, in my opinion. And yes, I think the biggest thing with this is that the wide receivers themselves will be coached individually by Paulie. So they'll be with him like every single day, effectively. I don't know exactly how Iowa State runs their ship, but that is basically what will happen. But it's going to be also bigger than that because he is the offensive pass game coordinator. Then we can use Burkle. We can use Hansen. We can incorporate other positions into that passing attack. I mean, shoot, you could even technically use Rocco, So that's what I'm really excited about for this. And it's cool that Paulie got his recognition because he did have, the passing game for Iowa State was just awesome. It was kind of I won't say it was the backbone of this team, but it pretty much was. This team needed to pass well, and they did all year. And Higgins and Noel were the beneficiaries of that for sure. So Paulie, at this time, as far as I'm aware, coming back, can't wait to see him. Basically, this will be a tough one for him. That's a huge hole to fill. How's he going to go about that? Where's he? What players is he going to use? Are we going to add maybe some more wide receiver talent? I don't imagine so. I don't think wide receiver right now is the biggest issue for Iowa State. And we'll talk about that. We have all season to talk about that. But then from there, with the players that we currently have on the roster, how are we going to play to their strengths and how are we going to get this passing attack to where it was this year? Because it was obviously, pretty dangerous. It was pretty awesome. Speaking of dangerous, though, Iowa State will be taking on Kansas at home in a women's basketball match. That's going to be a dangerous game for Kansas. You're going to have to look out. We'll be covering that more right after this. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. I love betting on which players will score a touchdown and how many points each team will score. It's thrilling. Not only can you bet on who will win the game, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points each team will score, and so much more. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Switching gears here, we're going from football talk, from the gridiron, if you will, to the hardwood. Iowa State women's basketball will be taking on Kansas in Hilton in their second Big 12 conference game. You're here with Locked On Cyclones, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's break it down, shall we? I'm going to get right to it. I think Iowa State's going to win this game. I think a lot of people maybe feel like Iowa State's women's team isn't as strong as their men's team because the men's team is so unbelievably good. But they're still a solid team. And I think more than that, honestly, Kansas, as much of the blue blood title as they get, I don't think they're as good as I guess as for me personally. My mentality going into this was like, oh, this might be a tough one for the Clones. Looked at Kansas and I thought, actually, maybe not. Maybe Iowa State can handle this one at home, undefeated in non-conference play. Excuse me. I was like the 24th time Bill Fennelly's done that. That's awesome. And it'll be a blackout, so that'll be cool as well. I really like where Iowa State's at in this, just kind of in this whole scheme of things. But there are some issues that Iowa State has, and then they're currently dealing with. Both of these teams' last game was the 21st, so like 10 days ago. And so they're both coming off quite a bit of rest. And the players were kind of like, hey, love that. Absolutely. Big fan of getting to go home, see the people that we love, hang out with them, get the mind maybe off of basketball for a few days or whatever, and then come back hungry, ready to go. And that's awesome. And then Bill Fennelly, in this kind of dead period, this little bit of a break, had some interesting tactics, if you will. He went through and printed off a stat sheet for almost every player. He said he did not do it he said, I don't think I've done it for everyone, but I've done it for almost everyone. He printed off a stat sheet of their best game. And I love this because it's easy in basketball to get in the mindset of, I am just not that good. Like I'm not seeing the ball go through the hoop. Let's pass it off to somebody else, even though I have the open look. A very mental type of deal there. Very possible. And Fennelly's ideology here was, if we can just show them what they've done, we're not asking them to do something they haven't done. We're not asking them to go off for 69 points and 104 rebounds. Like that would be ridiculous. We're not going to do that. We're asking them to do what they've done in the past. They have done this. And he said sometimes, it was a game at Iowa State. Those ones are easy to remember. Transfers, those ones, maybe a little bit harder to find, but he still goes and finds them. Sometimes he even went back and found a high school game, he said, which is awesome because that's true. That's true coaching right there. And he said, the stats don't lie. The video don't lie. This is really what you did. If you went 4 for 5, you went 4 for 5, whatever the stat might be. I like that quite a bit. And then to stay in the coaching vein during this off period, Iowa State isn't doing classes right now, right? This is winter break. And so he talked about how this is like, you're effectively a pro player right now. You don't really have much else. You don't have to go to classes right now. You can come in, work, and then do whatever. How are you treating that extra time to get better? How are you? What are you doing with that time to make the team better, to be a better basketball player yourself? He talked about you can definitely put in an extra 15 minutes shooting around now. You just don't have that super duper time crunch that the classes brings and makes you kind of deal with. And the players thought that was a neat little concept as well. They're like, this is, if you don't go pro, this is when you are a pro. This is all you're doing right now is basketball. And I think that, hearing those few things, that this team is in a very good spot to take on a Kansas team at home. Kansas coming off of a loss to Baylor, currently 10-2. But honestly, they had a relatively easy non-conference schedule. I didn't see too many names in there that were a big deal. They lost to Iowa, though, was their other loss. So common loss there between the Cyclones and the Jayhawks. And so, I'm just not that scared. 10-2 looks a lot scarier than 9-5, but that's only one more win. And if you don't schedule as many hard games, you're just not going to pick up those losses, right? Like that's how the non-conference slate works. And so, yes, Kansas is considerably ranked higher than Iowa State in the Big 12 standings just because of that 2-loss number. But I think this is a very, very winnable game for the women. Obviously, Audie Crook's going to play a big role in here. I'm very interested to see how does she go. How does she do in this game? And the offense will kind of flow through her and obviously Emily Ryan. But overall, in my opinion, we dropped the game to Oklahoma State. That is what it is. Now we got to go. We kind of got to turn it on a little bit here, and I think this is a great opportunity for the team to do just that. You pick up a home win. You pick up a win over Kansas, who is kind of a rival, especially in basketball. Widely touted to be a good team, not ranked, but definitely a very good team. And I think this is where you kind of springboard. This is where we stop the skid, if you will. And we finally, because we just had a tough non-conference schedule. I mean, to put it completely frank, we had a tough non-conference schedule. And so now you can kind of, boom, we get it at home, boom, blackout game, boom, win over Kansas. Now we're off to the races. Now we're going. And we found kind of who we are at this point in the season. I think this is a great opportunity for the women. And it's a kickoff the new year. I mean, Happy New Year, first off. Probably should have led the show with that. But hey, I'm just kind of in sports mode right now, Not a lot changes around the first. A lot of big games, though, coming around this time of year. So I'm a huge fan of everything that's going on. Shout out to you guys for watching this point in the episode or listening. You guys are the ones that make the world go round. Be sure to subscribe wherever you're listening or watching so we can prove once and for all that it is, in fact, a Cyclone state. Until next time, Cyclone fans, sayonara.